Hello everyone, welcome to Mellyworm, and this is Magic the Gathering Deck Tech. Now, this is a new series I'm kicking off where basically I'm going to run through one of my commander decks and kind of explain how to play it, what are some things you might expect from it, and this overall strategy to kind of help build your familiarity with Magic the Gathering. Now, I don't know if anyone else has done this, but I haven't researched it, and if I haven't researched it and I don't know, it doesn't exist. Now, we're going to kick off the series with my Hydra Tribal deck because this was the first deck that I built, and I feel like it makes sense to do it that way. Now, with that in mind, let's get into the deck. Okay, so first thing I want to address before we get into the actual strategy or concepts behind the deck is the commanders, because let's be honest, that is the main appeal behind the commander format, is building a deck around like one specific creature. Now, in the case of this deck, there are three different creatures that I use as my commanders. One is Selvala, the other is Vorinclex, and Gargos, Vicious Watcher. The reason I have three different commanders that I can kind of interchange flawlessly is it depends on how competitive I want to play. Now, Selvala is much more fast and an excellent EDH commander. Gargos is much more just getting a whole bunch of creatures out fast. And then Vorinclex is later game, but it causes creatures to ramp up very quickly. Now, you might be saying to yourself, if two of the three commanders you just mentioned aren't even Hydras, then how is it a Hydra Tribal deck? And you're correct, but here's the thing. Even though this is a Hydra Tribal deck, the majority of creatures in this deck are Hydras. So as we dig into the deck, I want to bring up a couple things. First off is that the primary strategy behind this deck is to make the largest creature possible. Now, this can be done one of two ways. One is through group synergy with different creatures, or through the second concept that this deck primarily revolves around is +1/+1 counters. And there's two ways to go about making the largest creature. First is using a metric ton of mana in order to make a large Hydra. The way Hydras work is that most of them have an X value mana cost, which means you can choose how much mana you want to use to pay for the creature itself. The more mana you use, the stronger the creature. However, there's also a second route, which is field effects, which double counters. So an excellent example of this would be Doubling Season. So let's take Voracious Hydra for an example. You can choose how much mana you want to spend to cast Voracious Hydra. More mana, stronger the creature. However, if Doubling Season is on the board, it doubles the amount of counters that the creature would get, which makes the creature stronger. With that said, we talked a lot about the creatures. Now, and I mentioned Doubling Season, but there's a lot of enchantments on here which overall help with the board state. Some of these include Colossal Majesty, Momentous Fall, Momentous Fall spell, Doubling Season, Branching Evolution. The list kind of goes on of different things that you can use to help the field make it more conducive to double the counters that you're going to be putting on your creatures. Now, on a side note, it's important within every single Magic the Gathering commander deck that you want to have a plan in case things go wrong, because very seldomly do things go right. I have a couple board wipes in here. I'm not going to dig through the deck to show you it, but there's a couple board wipes through different means. There's some prevention, but overall, and different creatures themselves make it hard to hit other creatures. One example would be a Chromos Memorial, which is a personal favorite of mine. As I mentioned previously, there's a couple non-Hydra creatures in here. The two most notable is Selvala and Vorinclex, which I discussed earlier. However, there's also these other Vorinclex, which allows me to produce more mana, and then Karametra's Acolyte. If Staff of Domination is on the board, Karametra's Acolyte is a infinite mana generator, and then Vorinclex just screws everyone else over. Though that's kind of the big high points. I don't have a whole lot of other non-Hydra creatures because, again, it is a Hydra Tribal deck. That's the overall kind of general gist of the creatures. Now, with enchantments or spells, there's a lot of mana ramp in here. So, given that Hydras are very large creatures, they require a lot of mana, which is why my new favorite commander is Selvala, because I can produce a lot of mana very quickly. Now, that means that there's also a lot of mana ramp. So, green is the number one color for mana ramp. I mentioned that in a previous video. But that means I have cards such as Migration Path, Cultivate, Kodama's Reach. Cards like that allow me to get a lot of mana very quickly, in addition to Emerald Medallion, where it makes things cheaper, or also Gargos itself, which is another commander I regularly use, which allows me to reduce the overall cost of Hydra spells in general. That's just a few examples, but overall, that kind of covers the main spell component, where it's ramp or prevention from being hit, or just kind of stalling until I can make a larger thing. Now, there's a second win condition, which a lot of people don't really think about when it comes to this deck. There's a few cards in here which create a combo that is instant win, and that is Selvala, Heart of the Wilds, Akroma's Memorial, and Staff of Domination. When those three cards are on the battlefield, and honestly, Akroma's Memorial doesn't even have to be on the field at first, all you really need is Selvala and Staff of Domination. And a creature with power that's larger than 5, I believe, if memory serves. What this does is this creates infinite mana. However, Staff of Domination also has this nice little line of text, which allows you to basically draw a card, retap, repeat process. Now, what that allows you to do is that allows you to draw your entire library. I mentioned that before, but I don't think I emphasized it enough. You can draw your entire library, but leave like about 20-ish cards, just so that way you don't draw yourself out in case someone has like a mill deck or anything like that. But what you're going to do is you're going to have those two cards on the battlefield, but you're also going to put out Akroma's Memorial, so everything gets haste, first strike, flying, vigilance, all that fun stuff. And you're going to create a ton of Hydras, basically casting your entire library, because again, you have infinite mana, and that allows you to hit everyone on the battlefield with every single Hydra in the deck with all the enter the battlefield triggers all at the same time. That is usually game over. Because most of them also have trample, and there's also Triumph of the Hordes in here, which gives everything infect. So there's, aside from lifelink, I don't think there's a single keyword that's missed in here. Indestructible. I don't have indestructible. But that is another game-ending way, which ironically has happened more times than I care to admit. There's also a couple of tutors in here, so I can try and grab some of those cards. But realistically speaking, usually the Hydras do most of the work. Now, the deck list will be available in the description below. I realize I didn't go through every single one of these cards, but that gets tedious and you don't want to watch that, I'm assuming. But if you have any questions, make sure to drop them in the comments below, and I will make sure to answer those. But aside from that, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll learn something new in the next video.